Hi, everyone. Welcome to those of you who are attending our first hot take session. Welcome to those of you who've been here before. Hello again. We at Asia Society France are pleased to host our third installment of Hot Take. They're sessions where we provide in-depth insights on topics of actualité to help us just get a better grasp on current events. These sessions, like I was mentioning earlier, for those of you that were online, are intended to be squeezed into your very busy schedules. They're usually around 30 to 40 minutes long. They're really sessions, full of key insights from our rich network of expertise that we have here at Asia Society France. For today's hot take, we have a debrief on the upcoming general elections in India with the leading expert on India who has many, many titles, as you will discover in this session. So please join me in welcoming Monsieur Christophe Jaffrelot. He's a research director at the Center for International Studies and Research at Sciences Po and the National Center for Scientific Research in Paris. Additionally, he holds the position of the president of the French Political Science Association. He's also a professor of Indian politics and sociology at King's College London. And if all of that wasn't a tongue twister, is also an author of many, many books, and most recently, his book, Gujarat Under Modi, Laboratory of Today's India, selected as one of the books to read in 2023 by the Financial Times. As always, just to get the housekeeping stuff out of the way, please don't hesitate to leave your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens, and we'll get to the Q&A part of the session at the end. Let's get started. Hello, Monsieur Jaffrelot. So nice to have you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
I will kick off with my first question and stop talking and let you speak. The elections in India, as everyone here knows, everyone who's interested, has garnered a lot of international attention. Can you provide an overview of the major political parties and their key contenders in these upcoming elections?
Well, this time the scenario, the situation is slightly different from what it was last time, 5 years ago, and what it was 10 years ago also, because the opposition finally has joined hands, has closed ranks, and you have now something like 28 parties around the Congress party, the largest opposition party, facing BJP, the ruling party. And we will see how far it makes a difference. The first big question mark that is not easy to respond to is how many constituencies, will see only one opposition candidate against the BJP candidate. And this is something we'll know very late in the day because the elections will last for 6 weeks and you can withdraw from the fray at the last minute. So it's after the elections will be over that we will know how united the opposition was. But that's the main difference. The rest is exactly the same. The same leaders facing each other, Narendra Modi, Prime Minister, Rahul Gandhi, the main opposition leader. And at the state level, the same state parties, the only difference being that they are doing some seat adjustment. They are more united than they used to be.
Okay, great. Then I'll dive into the opposition a little bit more. How significant, in your opinion, is the unification, or how united is this alliance, and how do you think that will play out in the election results?
Well, as I said, the main question is how far will they really decide a seat adjustment, as we say in India, resulting in straight fights. And it's really not easy to figure out now what will be the end result. Secondly, you may have rebels because those who are denied tickets because of this unity of the opposition may well stand as independent candidates or may shift to BJP. And incidentally, this is another very important new development. We've seen something like 1/5 to 1/4 of the BJP candidates coming from the opposition. Well, they came because they were attracted by some carrot, including a ministerial portfolio or whatever, but they also came because of some stick, because they were also under some threat of fiscal pursuit, any kind of punishment. But it's a lot. When you have such a large proportion of the candidates of the ruling party coming from the opposition, you have one clear indication that it's not a level playing field. And it's not for many other reasons, including, I'm sure we'll speak about it, the media scene and the financial scene.
Yes, indeed. Those we'll get into that maybe once I ask you a little bit more of overview questions, and then we can get down to the nitty-gritty, as we say. How would you then describe? We've talked about the overview in terms of the parties at play and the political side. What are the sentiments in your view? What are the key factors that are playing in this election? What are the key issues that are shaping the narrative of the election?
What is very surprising in India, but it's not only in India, you can see that in Erdogan's Turkey as well, is the disconnect between the popularity of the leader, at least after 10 years. Erdogan may not be as popular as he used to be, but after 10 years, he was definitely. And on the other hand, the economic situation, you can say the socio-economic situation. The Indian economy is not in a good shape. We have a growth rate that is certainly artificially exaggerated by the official statistics. At least it's a jobless growth. If there is growth, there is no job creation. Unemployment is a real issue. Joblessness is a big issue, especially among the youth. Urban youth, you have roughly 28% of the 60 years old plus, 60 years to 25 years old, who are jobless in the Indian cities. And it's not only because of a lack of education. Very surprisingly, the more educated you are, the more affected by joblessness you also are. So that's a big issue. Other issues, very well known because we have heard of the farmers' movements. The Indian agriculture is also in a very bad situation, partly because of climate change, by the way, partly because of the water issue. There is no water, not enough water for cultivating sugarcane, rice, cotton, all these things coming from the Green Revolution. And therefore, peasants are on the warpath. They have made the government change its mind on the privatization of the distribution of the retail sector, but they want more. They want minimum support prices, and the government is not prepared to accommodate them. And of course, one more point that needs to be said is that the industry is declining. It's a very strange development. India is getting a declining industry before being industrialized, really. So the share of the industry of manufacturing is eroding. We have now something like 14% of the GDP made by the manufacturing sector, which is 3 percentage points less than when it was when Narendra Modi became prime minister. One of the explanations is, of course, China. China is exporting a lot of goods to India. And that is also the reason why you have this huge trade deficit, more than $120 billion last year, which is creating clearly a dependence. India is depending upon China, not only for consumer goods, but also for many of its industries, including, by the way, the pharma sector. Pharmaceuticals are supposed to be a strong point of India. India is supposed to be the pharmacy of the world because of generics, but many of these generics are made possible only because of Chinese products. So it's not a good situation, clearly, on the economic front, except for the happy few, the rich ones, billionaires. And India has many billionaires. In fact, Bombay has more billionaires than Beijing for the first time this year, which is an indication of a gap between the rich of the poor and the poor that is phenomenal. But Narendra Modi may well get away with it because you have this disconnect between the assessment of your daily life and your fascination for the man. The real popularity of Narendra Modi comes from a form of fascination is the one who is seen by many as making India great again, because he is able to meet the leaders of the world, invite them at the G20 summit in September last year, and has cultivated this image of strength vis-a-vis the neighbors, including Pakistan. That's one very important emotional dimension of his popularity. Another one is, of course, the role he is now playing as a high priest of Hinduism. In January this year, he inaugurated a huge temple in Ayodhya, a temple that has been built exactly where there was a mosque that had been destroyed in 1992 by a Hindu nationalist activist from his own party. And when he inaugurated this temple, he really played the role of a priest, literally pronouncing the words, having the formulas, the Sanskrit formulas that are needed for this kind of inauguration. And we've seen him meditating in a cave, bathing in the Ganges, because even when he meditates in a cave, there is, of course, a photograph behind him. It's so powerful. The message is so powerful. He is above accountability. So we'll see, but it would be very surprising if he is punished, if he was punished. His party may be punished, because when you have state elections at the regional level, BJP does not do so well. But the same states which do not support BJP at the state level will support Modi as prime minister. That's probably what will be the scenario again. That has been true in the past.
Okay, I see. Thank you for that. You touched upon a lot of things that I want to get into in this session, whether it's the India-China dynamics or his popularity and how that's changed. But I'll get to all of that. We started off talking about the key sentiments and kind of the narrative around the election. What about voters? Has voter turnout been a concern in past elections? And is it a concern in this upcoming election? And if it's a concern, who is it a concern for?
The turnout, you mean? Well,
yes.
It's fascinating to see that today Indians are voting more than Europeans, French people for sure. No, if you look at the what we call legislative elections, general elections, in France we have now a very low turnout, 55% or so. India is at least 10 percentage points ahead of that, 66, 67, 68%. That's the rate, which is of course not enough, but significantly more than what we used to see till the 90s. Over the last 20 years, to vote has become something very important for everybody. And another very interesting development is women are now voting as much as men. And that was not the case at all. Till the 90s, 2000s, you had a very big gap of 10 percentage points. This gap is over. Sometimes women vote even more than men in some states, in the South especially. So, yeah, it's not a concern. Everybody votes. It's, of course, the education, I would say political awareness of the voters, that is the main problem. And this problem is largely due to the fact that there is hardly any debate. Narendra Modi does not debate with anybody. No press conference, zero, no political debate. So in contrast to what you have in each and every democracy, at least the two main leaders have to exchange arguments. You can't even imagine an American election without at least the three usual debates, and same in France. There, it's a one-way traffic. He is bombarding people with his own views, never agreed to have questions, to be contradicted. By the way, it is a sense of some insecurity. He is very much insecure when he speaks. He needs a prompter. He speaks always with a prompter when he is on TV. Otherwise, it's a one-way traffic, and the media are now not allowed to ask questions, and in any case, there is no TV channel that is prepared to exert any critical mind.
And then going off of that, how has his leadership in this sense specifically been different than leaderships in the past in India?
Well, it depends who you're thinking of. It's very similar to what Indira Gandhi was doing. Very similar. By the way, she was equally insecure. The populist, both of them are populist. The populist is painting such a rosy picture, such an ideal situation that, of course, any question is exposing the bluff, is calling the bluff of the demagogue. So there are great similarities between Modi and Mrs. Gandhi. She was also very authoritarian. Big differences with his predecessor, Manmohan Singh, who was an amazing person, a team player, who had a great government, appointing very competent ministers for the economy, for environment, for foreign affairs. Narendra Modi's government is just non-existent. You can name a couple of ministers. That's it. The others are not doing anything. The bureaucrats do the job. He is also very different from Jawaharlal Nehru, of course. And Nehru had set up a very collegial modus operandi, and he was very respectful of federalism. So he constantly consulted the chief ministers. By contrast, Narendra Modi has centralized power to an extreme that is completely unprecedented. When, for instance, he imposed the lockdown, India had a very, very tough time during the COVID pandemic. Something like 4 million people died. It was a disaster. It was very, very badly managed. And one of the reasons why it was so badly managed was that it was not a fight that a battle that they fought together, but he imposed the lockdown in 6 hours without taking any advice, without consulting the chief ministers, the state governments. But there are many other examples. When he demonetized, when he withdrew in 2016, 85% of the money in circulation, again, he did not take any advice, he did not consult anybody, and the result was a very bad economic crisis. By the way, you can say that India never recovered from this 2016 decision of demonetization. If we have such a bad economic situation, it's largely the legacy of this decision that was made in the name of anti-corruption drives. In fact, he wanted simply to to prevent opposition parties to use their own cash to win elections.
I see. I'd like to talk about that, maybe his models a little bit more, because I know you talk about that in your recent book, Gujarat under Modi, Laboratory of Today's India, which we will do a separate talk on next month. So all of you listening here, you can stay tuned for that. That'll be online next month. Your book touches upon themes of identity politics, Modi's economic model, and some of the controversies that have gone on. Can you shed some light on all of this and why you describe Gujarat as the laboratory of India?
Well, this is the main thing. This is, for me, the most interesting thing. It's very rare to see a political system that has been shaped, constructed at a regional level to be scaled up to a semi-continental level. He invented a system for 60 million people, and he could transpose it for 1.4 billion people. Well, this system, for me, has 4 pillars, and I will list them very quickly. One is, of course, polarization along ethno-religious lines. You polarize society, in fact, to transform the religious majority into a political majority. And Hindus are 80%. If you polarize by promoting Hinduism, by denigrating Islam and Christianity, by also engineering communal violence, then at the time of voting, Hindus will support BJP more, and that's what happened, and that's what he continued to do after 2014. But there is another pillar that is also seen in Gujarat and then transposed in India at large, that is the capture of institutions. You can even say the desinstitutionalization of the state. Personal relations, personal power prevail over the institutions. The first targets there are always the police and the judiciary. By the way, it's not the only one. All the national populists have targeted the judiciary. You name one, Orban, Kaczynski, Netanyahu, of course, Erdogan. The judiciary is their bête noire. They can't stand the independent power of the judiciary because they have to prevail, and they can say, I am the people. Who are you? In the name of what legitimacy can you resist me? So that's the second pillar. And incidentally, many policemen who were in his entourage in Gujarat have come to Delhi. Many people have traveled from Gujarat to Delhi. Third, a very specific political economy. The political economy of Gujarat was already very special because most of the businessmen, successful businessmen in India are Gujaratis. You name one big businessman, he comes from the state. He may be in Bombay, but his ancestors have come from Gujarat to Bombay. So, for instance, the Tatas, but also the Ambanis, but of course Gautam Adani. These are the winners in Gujarat and the winners today in India. How does that work? Very simple. You see these people getting free land for their factories. The Nano, for instance, the Tata car was made in a place that was literally given to Ratan Tata by Narendra Modi. You also have privatization. Nowadays, Gautam Adani benefits from privatizations of airports, of seaports, and also in the telecom, huge sectors of the territory of India are granted to these oligarchs. These are oligarchs. This is a system of oligarchs. In return, of course, they pay for the election campaigns. They pay for very costly election campaigns. The populists have to saturate the public sphere to convince people that they are the people. So last time in 2019, BJP spent $3.5 billion in the election campaign. This is a huge amount, unprecedented again. So political economy. And the fourth, of course, the fourth pillar of this system is Modi himself. He has learned how to be a great leader in Gujarat. He has learned how to use social media. He has learned how to use holograms. He has known how to use TV channels. He created a TV channel for himself in Gujarat. And that has been transposed at the national level when he became prime minister. So this is really a kind of experiment that political scientists will probably ponder upon, because not only it's unprecedented in India, but I think it's unprecedented across the globe. How do you transpose a state, a regional model into a national one? That's what the book is about.
Well, we're looking forward to diving into the book specifically more in a couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. I want to touch upon something you said earlier, which was some of the parallels that you were making between Modi and other leaders. Can you talk a bit more about that? And where can we see perhaps a modification in terms of policy or in terms of leadership in other countries?
Well, this category, the category of the national populists, have two things in common. They are nationalists. They claim that they are strong enough to defend their nation. And they define their nation not as made of all the citizens living in the borders of this nation, but as the sons of the soil. Those who were born there, those who are not migrants, who are not immigrants, who are the majority of the people. They are nationalists, sovereignists, nativists, but they are also populists. So for these people, they do things which allow them to relate directly to them. So they disintermediate politics. Many of them, by the way, made a political party after winning elections. Think about Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro did not need a party to win. He had to create a party afterwards. Or when they have a party, they short-circuit the party. Modi has systematically created a parallel power structure, not choosing the party, but choosing PR companies. By the way, American PR companies help them a lot often. And when they relate to the people, they do something very specific, something that one of my colleagues, Pierre Ostigui, has very well described. On the one hand, they claim that they are like everybody. They are like ordinary people, And Modi can say that because he comes from a very plebeian background. He is from a low caste. He was not from a rich family, not at all. So I am the people because I am like you. And people say, oh, he is like me. And in fact, in the case of Modi, they imitated him so much that he started to distribute masks and they could wear his face on their face. That was really the populist at its best. But the populist is not only like me, he is also my ego ideal, as Ostigui says, because he is exceptional. He has charisma. Charisma is a word we usually resort to say, well, this man is full of virtue, exceptional virtue. But when you look at Max Weber's definition of charisma, he doesn't say that charismatic people are virtuous. He says they're exceptional. They make exceptional things. And yes, he did. Modi did things nobody dared to do before. To send aircrafts to bombard Pakistan in 2019, to demonetize, to, of course, have preside over the largest pogrom, anti-Muslim pogrom, post-independence, almost after 2022. He did things so exceptional that he mesmerizes people. And this is exactly what the national populist is able to do. He can claim that he's like everybody, and at the same time of a different essence, of a different quality. And that's why he is above accountability, because he is of a different type, a different quality.
I see, and I have my eye on the time, and if we get to it, we can maybe talk about some other countries where you kind of see this trend. But I'd be remiss not to ask you about the India-China dynamic specifically when we talk about relations with foreign countries, whether we're talking China's Belt and Road, border disputes, the Quad, the rising Quad, the importance of the Quad. What does all of this mean for India's relationship with China? You talked about industry, pharma. Is it a strategic rivalry, perhaps? How can we look at that currently and post-elections?
Yeah, well, Xi Jinping has been a real game changer for everybody, but of course for India. So if you look at the RBI, the Road and Belt Initiative, for India, it's an attempt at encircling the country. Of course, with Pakistan, with the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, something like $56 billion of money invested by China to develop Pakistan, and using, by the way, a territory India is claiming in Kashmir, Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, as India says. But it's not only that, it's also that other neighbors are now targeted by China, attracted by China. Some of them have already started to be more friendly to China than to India. Sri Lanka, for instance. Sri Lanka, that is a very important neighbor for India, has agreed to have a deep sea port sold to China. It was built by China. It was therefore not sold, but given for 99 years. That's quite similar. And in these deep sea port surveillance ships, Chinese surveillance ships are coming, therefore making India very nervous. Similarly, Maldives have shifted to India and have expelled the military bases, small bases, but still there was an Indian military base that has to leave, that has to be disaffected. Nepal is a country that may shift from India to China for, economic reasons, in addition to geostrategic pressures. So for India, the Belt and Road Initiative is really existential, all the more so as China is now encroaching on the Indian territory in the Himalayas. And when India tries to resist, you have skirmishes. In 2020, 20 soldiers, Indian soldiers, were killed by Chinese troops in the spring of 2020. And the territory lost has never been recovered. In fact, it is so embarrassing that India denies that it has lost any territory to China. But the satellite photographs show that this is the case. And therefore, you mentioned the Quad. Yes, that's why India is joining hands with the West, the US-led Quad, for instance, but not only the Quad, not only Japan, Australia, and the US, but other partners, including France. And it's one of the reasons why India is buying arms in large numbers and to diversify, to make sure that the supply side is not monolithic. India buys to France as much as to, well, almost as much as Russia these days, and the US and Israel and others. So China is, in a way, pushing India in the arms of the West. We don't know who makes the Chinese strategy in Beijing, because if you think about it, it's a mistake. It's probably a big mistake. Now, it's not as if India was very much in love with the Western values. And here there is a big tension, because at least the US are very critical, not only privately, sometimes publicly, of the economic democratic decline of India. So it's not as if the fact that China was pushing India in the arms of the West was the end of history. It's not so clear. It's not so obvious. There'll be tensions. India will try to remain equidistant. And one thing that India will try hard is to retain the connection with Russia. And this connection with Russia will make the love story with the US very complicated. There'll be this complex relationship. That's what they call plurilateralism. It's another word for non-alignment. That's what India is so much after, has always been so much after, and is still willing to develop.
Great, thank you. We got some questions that you've answered some of them, so I'll leave you with the last one for the sake of timing, so we wrap this up on time. I have to ask the hottest of your hot take. We hear the phrase India, the world's largest democracy. We hear it all the time. Is India, in your opinion, still a democracy? Well,
you need to qualify this democracy. You can't say it's a democracy anymore. You have to qualify that. For instance, it's certainly an ethnic democracy in the sense that minorities are not equal citizens. Similarly, you would say it's an illiberal democracy. I don't like this formula because it's really an understatement to my mind. I would prefer to say it's a system of electoral authoritarianism. You have elections, but it's not a level playing field, and there is no rule of law. There is an insufficiently developed rule of law for the democratic quality of the country to be retained. Democracy cannot be only voting. To vote is only one part of the story. The rule of law is the other part. And by the way, elections are not free and fair, do not remain free and fair if you don't have rule of law. So yes, I would qualify definitely democracy when we apply it to India, and you can say it is now the world's largest ethnic illiberal democracy, and I say it on purpose because there are many others. There are many others of the same kind.
Well said, Monsieur Jaffrelot. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for answering everybody's questions. Thank you to everybody who joined. We are looking forward to seeing you all again. Monsieur Jaffrelot, thank you, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.